Showing with computer audio. Oh, podium PC. That's encouraging. Share screen. Which screen? There's only one screen here. Share. Nora Sultan, you hear me? Caitlin Chen, Maggie Colburn, you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, great. Let's work the new car simulation first. Although I want to go to the class pack for a moment. Um, um, Reviewing. Simulation is descriptive, not prescriptive like linear programming. Thank you for coming so quickly. I want to use two different computers.
Okay.
This one doesn't have Office 365. My laptop does.
Okay.
I plugged in my laptop. I went to laptop connection and pressed HDMI.
I see.
Put it in the
Oh, there it
loose
is.
connection right here.
It's actually up right now.
I know, a moment ago I saw that
Yep.
was slightly loose.
It looks like it's coming loose at the back right here.
I would love to use one and then the other. Is Zoom going all right? I would like to use this podium computer until I get to a certain topic that this doesn't have the capability for.
Okay. It just takes a second to switch. There it goes.
So when I'm ready to switch to this, all I have to do is press this
Yes, sir.
and answer the question about this.
Yep. And will you want your students on Zoom to see what's going on there? Because if you will, you want to enable sharing on both and join the class on the laptop. So
I don't
there's-
know what you're talking about. The answer is yes, I want them to see that.
Okay, awesome. So real quick, if we go to Zoom on here,
Zoom here or Zoom here?
I'll get right here for a moment. I'm gonna check a setting for you.
I don't know why Zoom is.
See, click this right there.
I don't know which one.
Should be that one. And quickly stop the sharing for a moment. Just make sure to click that button right there. Sorry, that's right there. That little tiny carrot right there. Yep. Multiple participants can share like that. Okay. You can go back to sharing. Actually, you know what? Click this right here. Click that window. So if you want your classmates to see, you want to join the Zoom call from here. That way you can just share and they'll see it on their end as well. So join the meeting.
That's beyond my pay grade. I can't remember all
That's
this.
all good. That's not your fault. password. Has to be this one.
This is too complex.
This one there.
And I'm gonna do the same thing for a second section,
Today,
yes. I think the probability is low that this is gonna work. I need to change my class.
share screen real quick. So what you can do for today, so you can carry on with the class, because you need to be able to join here so that your students up at home on Zoom can do it. What you can do is use the camera and place it on the screen so that they can see what you're projecting.
No, I don't want too much driven. I want to use this computer.
Mhm.
I don't know which computer to use.
You can share from here.
Share what?
That, okay. Then you can go back to your class. Whatever you were sharing.
Any chance you can come back?
Yeah, I'm in the building with you.
Come back and
Yeah.
okay. I was teaching. I don't know where I am. Can I close this?
You can close that. There you go. Is that what you're on? You're sharing right now. They're seeing this at home.
I guess. I'm gonna have to go to here. Open a blank one. Minimize this, minimize this, don't minimize that. Simulation 11, no, not that one, simulation. 2, I remember it opened them over there. Too far. It only is 5. I shall end this.
Yep, it's on right now.
Please come back at 4.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Simulation is descriptive. Uniform between 0 and 1 is RAND. Uniform between small and large, we have a formula for normal and empirical. We finished the news vendor simulation. We finished the chemistry lab. We finished bidding for a contract. And we'll look at new car development and then the queuing. Page 54, I believe. We're considering spending $1.2 billion right now to develop a new car. I'm on page 54 of the class pack. If I do that, it would bring in revenues for 8 years. At the end of each of 8 years, I don't know how many units I will sell. I model that as having the normal distribution with mean 150,000 cars, but standard deviation 30,000 cars. Year 2 sales will equal year 1 sales times a large fraction, something like 95%. So if the car is popular initially, it will remain fairly popular in year 2, 3, 4. If the car is unpopular initially, unfortunately, it will again remain unpopular. Year 2 sales is most of year 1 sales. Year 3 sales is most of year 2 sales, a little bit less. The decrease factor has mean 7%, so year 2 sales is about 93% of year 1 sales, about. Year 3 sales is approximately 93% of year 2 sales. Contribution to profit and the 1.2 billion overhead is 5,000 per car in the first year, but in subsequent years, you won't be able to raise your price as fast as inflation. So it's going to decline. Contribution per car sold will decrease by 6%. Development cost depreciation, I would not consider testing you on that. That's a pretty complex thing, even though I use straight line. We cannot deduct the entire $1.2 billion in the year we spend it. We have to spread it out over multiple years. That is an IRS requirement. Where the net present value of monies to be received at the end of years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will be discounted at 9%. We are in the 35% tax bracket. Let's analyze whether this is a good project or not. New car simulation is the book. Anybody need a minute? I guess not. Complete this row, these are finished. Fixed cost of development, 1.2 billion. Year one contribution per car, 5,000. Annual decrease in contribution, 6%. Tax rate, 35% bracket, 9%. Parameters for the normal distribution for year one sales. I just turned those yellow. Somebody look those up for me. The mean and standard deviation of year one sales. Do you see it? Yes, you see it, but you don't have to talk. 150,000 cars. Standard deviation, 30,000 cars. 150,000, 30,000. Let's simulate how many cars we sell. Equals norm. Let me show you something first. There is a worksheet function called the norm in, but the balloon said it's available for compatibility, backwards compatibility with earlier versions of Excel. Microsoft wants you to use the norm.in, which is a more modern version. There's no guarantee that Microsoft will maintain the norm.in worksheet function. Norm.in, the probability is the random number. I'd like us all to use the same, B13, comma, the mean, comma, the standard deviation. And the simulated number of automobiles sold is 192,745. That's good, it's above the mean. We expected 150,000, we sold 192,000. Subsequent years equals the previous year multiplied by 1 minus norm.in of this random number, comma, F77. $180,603 cars. In C14 equals B14. Multiplied by 1 minus a small fraction. Now I better absolutely reference F77. Then I can drag it to the right. Two formulas we've seen, B14 and C14. Let me display the formulas. Unit contribution is 5,000. Let's look at the big picture. Look at B 14, 15, 16. We just simulated a sale of 192,000 cars $5,000 contribution to profit and overhead for each. Multiplying those together, we made $963 million, almost $1 billion at the end of year one. Looking good so far because we only have to spend 1.2 billion, although we have to spend it at the beginning of year zero. All right. The number of cars sold in C15 is equal to the number of cars sold in the previous year, star open, 1 minus the 6%. No randomness here. Find the unique color. Those green ones. B14, C14, B15, a simple reference to B5, and C15. In both cases, the rightmost green cells copy to the right. The total contribution, once we have simulated the number of cars we sell in each of the 8 years, and we know the contribution per car, we multiply them out, depreciation equals the 1.2 billion divided by 8. Let me reference cell I-12. We get to deduct, legally deduct against our income for taxes, 1/8 of the 1.2 billion. That's 150 million in each of the 8 years. Oops, amateur error. B4 needs to be absolutely referenced. 150 million in each of the 8 years. The IRS requires us to report this as if we spent 1.8 of 1.2 billion in each of the 8 years. We did not. We spent it all at the beginning. Before tax profit is the total contribution minus the depreciation. The after-tax profit is 65%. In other words, 1 minus 35% of the before tax profit. And the cash flow is the after-tax profit plus the depreciation that we didn't really spend. I would not expect you to do that on an exam. Let me give you 3 or 4 minutes to review that. We want to compare the 1.2 billion that we're spending right now with the present value of these cash flows to be received at the end of years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me make a mistake and see if you catch what mistake I made. Equals NPV. It's asking me for the rate, the interest rate, not 35%, that's the income tax rate, the 9%, comma, now it's asking me for the values, and these would be the cash flows at the end of years 1 through 8 respectively. $2,708,000. The NPV is 2,708,000,000. So we spend 1.2 billion and we receive 2.7 billion. There's a mistake in my logic. What did I do wrong? So as not to waste time, I didn't subtract the 1.2 billion. I figured we're good friends, we can overlook 1.2 billion. In fact, the NPV after subtracting the 1.2 billion is 1.5 billion, not 2.7 billion. We all have the same random numbers, so you should be able to reproduce that. That completes the four examples. The first four examples: news vendor simulation, ChemLab, bidding, and new car. Let's look at the final example, which forms the basis for the homework. I want to say that the exam would not include anything as complex as this new car for two reasons. One, I don't expect you to know about depreciation unless you're a finance concentrator. And two, because it's too involved. I might ask you to do one step, not that step, not the depreciation. Simulate the number of new cars. I might ask you to do B14. And the answer is norm.n from B13, that's the random number, S6E6, the mean and the standard deviation. I might ask you to do C14. It's equal to last year's sales, B14, times 1 minus a tiny number. In other words, a large fraction. 1 minus a tiny fraction. Norm.n of rand, S7E7 is 7%, 3%. All right. Let's go to queuing. First, the glass pack. Page 55, we have a queuing system where arrivals are phone calls, catalog orders in some examples, airline reservations in other examples, reservation requests, internet, click here for an operator. The servers are the operators, the airline reservations, ticket agents, and so forth. Random times elapse. You studied queuing formulas in core operations management, didn't you? How'd you have? I didn't say you remembered them, I said you studied them. You remember things like lambda over mu minus lambda, where lambda is the arrival rate? You don't have to know that, but there were formulas for the simple case where the arrival process was Poisson or exponential, highly restrictive assumptions made. We're going to use simulation, which is more accurate. We're going to ignore the simple approximate formulas that exist for behavior of queues. Multiple server case, which server gets chosen. We're going to look at queuing with Dawkins. That's enough. Then we're going to look at this right in here. I am proud that in the book that I used to use for this course, at the bottom of page 852, it said you cannot use, essentially said, you can't use Excel or any spreadsheet to simulate queues. Spreadsheets are not suitable for queuing simulation. I showed the authors how to do it, and in the next edition of the book, they had my suggestion. So here's a schematic of calling population, people, perhaps arriving at a restaurant. Balking means they observe the line is so long that they refuse to wait and leave immediately. If they don't balk, they enter the queue, they go to server 1 or server 2, and then depart. And we'll get to this in a half hour. Back to queuing sim. Some background, we'll need the match worksheet function. We'll need the COUNTIF, which we've already seen a lot, so we won't cover that. The match worksheet function returns the relative position of what you're looking for. I have a row with 8, 2, 4, 3, 8, and I want to know where does the 3 lie. It's in the 4th position. The 3 is not in the 1st position, not in the 2nd, not in the 3rd, it's in the 4th position. The match works only with a single row or a single column because of the ambiguity of matching in a rectangular range. Let me give you an example. A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, F, F. Where is the BB? If we search the rows, it's in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd position. If we search the columns, it's in the 1st, 2nd. Let me continue the example. If we search the rows, it's in the 2nd position. BB occurs more than once. The match returns the relative position of the 1st occurrence of what you're looking for. If you search the rows, BB occurs in the 2nd position. If you search it by the column, BB occurs in the 3rd position. Because of that ambiguity, the match function does not work for a rectangular range. Equals match, quote AA for teaching. And here it's going to give me an error. And NA. If I said Q to S24, meaning a single row, it would be okay. The match works only in a single row or a single column. I wrote that right here. There are 2 different types of matches, just like VLOOKUP, interval and exact match. In this course, it's so late, we're going to only use the exact form of the match. You can write that down. 0 means find the first value equal to the lookup value, equal to. There are other types of matches, make a mental note of it. The largest less than or equal to, or the smallest greater than or equal to. You can just mentally note that for future reference, there are different types of matches. For example, I am 73 years old. I could be considered a 70-year-old if insurance rates for a male non-smoker ages 60 to 70, no, that's not me. 70 to 80, yes, that's me. I'm in the 70-year bracket. the largest less than or equal to, something like that. You can match differently, but for this course and for most of life, really, I've not really used the non-exact form of the match. We're going to use comma 0, the exact form of match. You may have noticed that in the VLOOKUP and the HLOOKUP, when I use an exact form of VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP, I use comma 0. I do not say comma false. Comma 0 exact works for the VLOOKUP and for the HLOOKUP and for the match. So that's what I use. Even though technically the hint, the below argument tooltip asks you if you want false for exact match or true for an interval match. The match worksheet function is the relative position of what you're looking up in the array. 0 means the first value equal to it. 8, 2, 4, 3, 8. 8 can appear twice. If we look for where is the 8, it won't even tell you that it occurs twice. It'll just tell you where the first occurrence is. The COUNTIF, we saw that previously. We used it twice for homework 5, so I won't cover that. Let me illustrate the use of the match within the VLOOKUP worksheet function. I got this example from a colleague who worked for a medical administration department for an insurance company. Medical code, I made these up. AAJ, annual chest x-ray. AXJ, for example, cholesterol test. Flight physical, well baby checkup, blah, blah, blah. The various medical codes, there are many. If you have Blue Cross insurance, your copay is $280 for an AAJ procedure. If you have United Health Insurance, your copay is $277. If you have HDH World or none, your copay are these amounts right in here. That's a big list of all the medical procedures. Today's patients, somebody had an HBC medical procedure. I coded it in yellow so you could see the answer. I'm looking for $449 because that patient has Blue Cross. I want to do a VLOOKUP of the code, VLOOKUP of H24 in this range B through F, but I don't know which column to extract the answer from. I could say if the patient has Blue Cross, then it's VLOOKUP in this range, second column. If the patient has United Healthcare, then I look it up in the same range, third column. If the patient has HDH World, then I look up the code in the range, comma, fourth column. If the patient has no insurance, I look up the range in the fifth column, but I don't want to use nested ifs. So I use a helper column, match the insurance company, I-24. That is Blue Cross. In this range, Blue Cross, United Health, HDH World, or none. It is the first insurance company. Convince yourself of that, the helper column. Well, the second patient, United Health, is the second insurance company. None is the fourth. Blue Cross is the first. So I see which column I need, and then I can do an VLOOKUP, excuse me. Let me remove the arrows. Can't see it. Please enlarge your formula bar. I might need to shut down Excel. There it is. For some reason, it worked over here. I feel that the Alt-Enter with alignment is particularly important in a formula like this. Let me do it without the alignment. Not many people can figure that out. It's correct. VLOOKUP of H25 in the range, blah, 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 blah. I really prefer to look at it like this. VLOOKUP of H25. What is that? Blue Cross? Nope, it's HBC the medical code, VLOOKUP of the medical code in H25, HBC, where? In the range B24 through F29, over at the left. Which column? J25 plus 1. Because the first insurance company, Blue Cross, is in the second column of the range. The second insurance company, United Health, is in the third insurance, is in the third column. Comma 0 means exact form of the VLOOKUP. Cost 1 uses this helper or scratch column. Cost 2, that's borderline too complex, but I'd accept it with, well, I'd accept anything. But I recommend that's too complex because the person who inherits the spreadsheet might not understand it. VLOOKUP of H24, that's the medical code. In the range B24 to F29. Which column? In the column match, the insurance company in the range of insurance companies plus 1, comma 0 for the exact form of the VLOOKUP. Comma 0 here is for the exact form of the match. Please understand this one. Take a few minutes. Let's look at 3 other worksheet functions related. We've seen the count. It counts the number of numbers. Meg and Larry and Jill and Sam and Salary are ignored because they're not numbers. E56 counts the number of numbers 4, 2, 2, and 2. There are 4 numbers in there, 4, 2, 2, and 2. Count A counts the number of non-empty cells, text and numbers, 4, 2, and Jill, and H54 as well, not because it's shaded dark gray, but because it contains a blank space. It's not empty. Count A is 4. Count blank counts the number of empty cells. That's kind of handy if you have a large range with 10,000 rows and you don't feel like scrolling down and down and down looking to see if there are any blanks. You can use the count blank worksheet function for the big range, and if it shows 0, then there's nothing empty. Work an in-class problem for me. Sheet in class. These customers used these vendors. Customer 123 used Acme and Jones. Customer ABC used only Jones. DEF used Smith, Jenkins, and Roberts. I want to know what fraction of the vendors used was Jones. In the yellow cell, 50%. Of the two vendors that customer 123 used, half of them were Jones. The other half was Acme. Practice that for a moment. Let me simplify the question. How many vendors did customer 1, 2, 3 use? What worksheet function would you use?
Count A.
Count if, yes. Count if in the range Acme, Jones, and empty, comma, F1, absolute. And it says 100%. That format is not appropriate. It's trying to say 1. Copy it down. All of them were, there's 1 Jones in there. 100% means 1. There's 1 Jones in here. There are no Joneses in here. I set it up with percentage format because the final version of the question, I need to divide by the number of vendors used. How many vendors are used? 2, of course, but what's the Excel worksheet function? Count A, is that what you said? I don't feel like typing the closed parentheses is required, so let me double click the entry. And it filled it in for me. Let me fill it down. 50%, 100%, 0%, 100%. The formula is count if the vendors, comma, F1, the numerator is the number of Joneses used. The denominator is the number of vendors used. Let's look at the no balking example. It's complex. It's not going to be on the exam. The homework is to extend this to another case, to show me that you understand this example by extending it. 2 server simulation. The sheet is no balking. In column A, we merely have 1 through 14, the record numbers. We want to simulate first the inter-arrival time, defined as the time that elapsed between the time the previous customer arrived and you arrived. For example, it is 4:01 right now. If you arrive at 3:58, and I'm just walking up, my inter-arrival time is 3 minutes. The time between successive arrivals. If you arrived at the queuing system at 2 minutes to 4, and right now it's 1 minute after 4, and I'm just arriving, then I have a 3-minute inter-arrival time. In red font, I have the inter-arrival times. Let's look at the possible inter-arrival times. They are in minutes. 0, 5, 10, or 12, empirical. Your inter-arrival time is defined to be the elapsed time between the previous arrival time and your arrival time. So with 45% probability, you arrive at the same time as the previous customer. With 25% probability, you arrive 5 minutes after the previous customer. With probability 0.1 and 0.2, you arrive these numbers of minutes. Your service time could be 4 minutes or 8 minutes or 11 minutes. 30% probability, 4 minutes. 35% probability, 8 minutes. 35% probability, 11 minutes. These are the VLOOKUP compare intervals. 0 to 0.3, 0.3 to 0.65, and 0.65 or larger. That's given. These are the VLOOKUP compare intervals for the inter-arrival time. 0 to 0.45, 0.45 to 0.7, 0.7 to 0.8, and 0.8 or larger. Let's simulate the inter-arrival times and then calculate the arrival times. That is conventional. I hard code, so we're all looking at the same numbers. Of course, this would, B6 would be VLOOKUP of RAND in the same range, B34 to C37, comma 2. Convince yourself of that. B6, VLOOKUP of RAND, B34 to C37. That's the first range. B34 to C37. A random number of 0.113 means the inter-arrival minutes is 0. I chose numbers so that a surge of customers would arrive so that a queue would build up. I chose those. Somebody arrives 0 minutes after the start. The next customer arrives 0 minutes later. The next customer arrives 0 minutes later. 0 minutes later. Let's calculate the arrival times. The arrival time of a customer is the previous customer's arrival time plus your own inter-arrival time. 0 plus 0 is 0. Plus 0 is 0. Plus 0 is 0. Finally, we get to some 12-minute inter-arrival times. The arrival time in C13 is the previous arrival time plus your own inter-arrival time. 0 plus 12 is 12. Coincidentally, plus 12 is 24. Plus 12 is 36. Plus 12 is 48, etc. The service time I have simulated as well. VLOOKUP of a random number. Please check carefully columns A, B, C, D. You will need to redo that in different columns for the homework that's due this coming Friday. I'm not quite ready for you, actually.
Okay. Later. 1:30, I saw your class.
Our next class then starts at 5. Can you hang around for 10 minutes?
Gotta stay in the room. Oh, wait, it's
I don't care. Come in 10, please. These customers, we simulate their inter-arrival time, we calculate the arrival time, and we simulate the service time. You can ignore the 3 red shaded columns because the concept is identical to other columns. Server 1 potential start time. Let me remove the arrows. The potential server start time is the smaller of, well, let me use it more specifically. Suppose I'm the server. I'm helping people with the homework. I'm in my office and there's a line of people out the door. I cannot get started helping you until you arrive. I cannot get started with you until I finish the previous customer's service. So potentially the potential time I could start on you is actually the larger of when I finished with the previous customer or when you arrive. I can't start on you before you arrive. You know, in manufacturing, that's not true. If I'm manufacturing shirts and there's randomness in the demand for shirts, and today I'm a factory, my customers are retail stores, Men's Warehouse and so forth. If there's very little demand for shirts today, I can make them anyway, building up inventory so that tomorrow or next month, when there's a large demand, I'll have built up inventory. But that's not true with queuing. I can't get started before the demand arrives. In every case, column E and column F for that matter as well, is the larger of, in E7, it's the maximum, the larger of maximum of C7, that's when the customer arrives, comma, J6 to J6. That's when I finish with the previous, emphasize previous, E7, C7, J6 to J6. When it copies down, for example, to here, when can I get started on the guy who arrives at time 24? The larger of 24 or when I finish the previous customer, which is 44, so I cannot get started on the current customer until time 44. The larger of the customer's arrival time and when I am finished with the previous, emphasize previous customer. Same concept for the other server. The actual start in G7 is simply the smaller of E7, S7. That copies down. The server uses the match worksheet function, which we just covered. Match the minimum G7 in the two possible start times, E7, F7. Would you rather start at 11 or at 0? You want to start as soon as possible. 11 or 0. I prefer 0, that's the second one. 11 or 11, I prefer 11, that's the first one. 22 or 11, I prefer 11, that's the second one. 22 or 22, if it's a tie, I just use the first one. 33 or 22, I prefer 22, that's the second one. 33 or 33, 44 or 33, I prefer 33, that's the second one. The server used. Server 1 start time has to begin with equals if H6 equals 1, server 1 start time. If we're using the first server, then we have an expression. Otherwise, it's empty. Look, for example, at I7. Server 1 start time, we're using server 2, so it's empty. That's crucial. Look at I7. I'll just turn it green. That green cell is empty because server 1 start time is not applicable. We're using server 2. Server 1 end time, again, if H7 is 1, the start time is I7 plus D7. Server 1 end time is the start time plus the simulated service time. Server 2 start time and end time, same concept, so I won't cover it. And the wait time is G minus C, the actual start minus the arrival time. Let me give you 5 minutes to study that. Shell Balking just says open the shell for the homework. Let's look at homework 6, the shells. There are P columns to produce. About 16. Column 1 is trivial, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Inter-arrival time, service time, arrival time, in a different order, so you cannot blindly copy and paste from the example I just completed. Inter-arrival time, red font. Service time, blue font. Inter-arrival time, enter a formula to simulate inter-arrival time. Service time, enter a formula to simulate. Delete this text box, enter VLOOKUP of RAND. Delete this text box, enter VLOOKUP of RAND. Delete this text box, enter formulas like that in column C of the class example. Columns A, B, C, D should not give you any trouble. Just go to the corresponding columns in the example I just covered. The number in the queue at arrival is unique to this problem. The number in queue at arrival is a count of all previous arrivals whose actual start time is greater than the new customer's arrival time. If I arrive and you are all in line ahead of me, but you've already started, then you don't count. You're not considered in front of me because you've already started. If you've already started, you're not counted either. The number in the queue when I arrive is the count of all previous, emphasize previous arrivals whose actual start time that has been calculated. Actual start time is in column I, is greater than the new customer's arrival time. What worksheet function are you going to use? Count if. Use the count if right there. Count all the previous customers if their actual start time is greater than my arrival time. Box, I want a yes or a no. According as, look at J36. J36 contains 2. The customer box, if the number in queue at arrival is greater than or equal to 2, the display is yes or no. Yes, he balks. No, he doesn't balk. Box equals if number in the queue at arrival is greater than or equal to J36. Yes, no. Potential server 1 and 2 start. Actual start time. Server used. This is analogous to my class example. Potential server 1 start time. If F6 equals yes, you do need to consider whether the customer in question balks. If he does balk, that by definition means he walks away. Then the display is quote, quote. There is no start time for server 1 if he balks. There is no start time for server 2 if he balks. There is no actual start time. The server used is empty. Server 1 start time, server 1 end time. Your homework assignment is to calculate these columns. Okay, come on up, please. I would like to switch computers to my laptop. And if I'm going to do this for my next section, I'm going to need to know what step 1 is, what step 2 is.
Sure. Okay. So
That has a mouse.
what you'll want to do, Larry, is you'll want to just sign into Zoom like you did on this computer. I think you went on to Brightspace, correct?
Yeah,
So you'll go on to Brightspace.
here.
It's on that laptop. Step 1, just go to Brightspace, log in.
I don't see it. I always have to do a search. Okay. Oh, yes, on this one, I do have a,
Little tab.
I don't have it over there.
So
sign on, it might ask me for a push.
Not lucky to miss this time. Just join the class if you're doing it now.
Join the class. That's the meeting today at 3 o'clock.
This is the one going right now.
Yes.
It's already started, right?
Yeah. I can tell you this, if you hesitate even for 1 second, then it's beyond my capability.
It looks like you're good. You're in it now. This is the class I'm on.
Zoomers, do you see? Well, what screen do you see?
What's one right now?
Well, wait a minute, they're the same.
For now. So what's this? Stop the share here because you want to share what's on your laptop there, correct?
Yeah.
And then you can share your screen here just like you did on the on the desktop here. Okay, and you can choose which screen you want to share. Is it this
Not this one.
Correct.
There's only 2.
Yep.
It's this one and I don't see it.
So go ahead and hit share right here. So it's already sharing. It's already set to your screen. Hit the blue button down there. Yep. And open up the Excel sheet. Which one is the one you want to show the class?
116, subsheets from master.
And now they're able to see that.
Sam Hudson, what do you see on my screen, please?
Sub-sheets from master sheet, cover all orange tab sheets. This approach is too complex.
Okay, let me give you a few minutes before I cover this to review the queuing, a few more minutes to study the queuing example, and I'll stay around to answer questions. This is too much for me. I can move this way. I like you work. 5 o'clock. I think I should use this computer exclusively for my 5 o'clock session.
Yes.
It's inconvenient because the screen is small.
Right. Yeah, I think it's to keep from switching using the laptop, which is exclusively easier.
Couldn't you spend the last 10 minutes with me?
Yeah.
I'll see you at 10 to 5.
Okay.
Thank you. If you're having trouble with the homework, come to the review session on Wednesday. Let me change topics now. Let's look at subsheets from master sheets. I have an old approach, which is too complex, as the name implies. I have a master sheet with summaries. The Adriatic district in Slovenia, reporting line IVS, business unit, so forth. Frank, I removed the last name. Frank is the German spelling of Frank. Employee, male. Birth date, national information about the employees. Their district, the country, the reporting line, the business unit, the name, birth date, gender, and educational degrees. Second guy works in the GCE district. That's in the Czech Republic. Reporting line, I don't know what that means. Business unit is a number. His name is Peter, spelled that way. Manager, etc. The task was to take this master sheet and extract all the Adriatic records and put them in a sheet called Adriatic. And also extract all the GCE records and put them in a sheet called GCE. And all the Nordic and Baltic records and put them in a sheet called Nordic and Baltic. Let's first of all look at what I do in column A. I want to create a unique identifying label for the record. Adriatic 1, because it's the first occurrence of Adriatics, equals B2, A2 equals B2, and COUNTIF B2 to B2, B2. That seems odd. Adriatic 1. When it copies down, A3 says equals B3, GCE, and COUNTIF B2 to B3, B3. That's the first GCE record. This is the first Nordic and Baltic record. This is the second GCE record. That's a good technique. Insert a new column, first insert this new column, and then give me a unique identifier for every record. It is Adriatic, followed by a 1 because there are no prior occurrences of Adriatic. The unique identifier of GCE2 is, the unique identifier of the next record is GCE1 because it's the first occurrence. The unique identifier for the third record in row 4 is Nordic and Baltic 1. The unique identifier for the fourth record in row 5 is GCE2 because we have a previous one. That is guaranteed to create a unique ID. You can then use that in the subsequent sheets to match and offset, which is ridiculously complex. There is a much easier way to do that. I'll spend about 60 seconds. Adriatic is the sheet. Adriatic 2 complex. ID, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First of all, I would use the match worksheet function to see where is the first Adriatic record. Let me go back to Adriatic and read my note. Note that the Adriatic district has rows 2, 7, 17, 21. Convince yourself that that is correct. 2, 17, look at the yellow shading. 2, 7, 17, and 21. Alternatively, that's records, 1 smaller. Adriatic is in the first one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Let's look at the rows. 2, 7, 17, and 21. Go to sheet Adriatic 2 complex and use the match worksheet function to see where that record is. Where is the first Adriatic record? Once you know that, offset to copy it. It works, but it's too complex. There is a much simpler way to work this problem. I'm going to hide all the orange sheets. And I think we can work it in 2 minutes. I want a sheet called Adriatic with all the Adriatic records in it. Let me insert a sheet. You should know how to do that. Let me type Adriatic in A1. Let me name the sheet Adriatic. So I hid all the ridiculously complex ones. I inserted a new sheet called Adriatic. I named it, and in A1 I put the name. Let me copy the field titles in Sheet Master. Let me select A through K, Control C, and paste them to D2. Believe it or not, I'm almost done. What can I do? What have I taught you in this course already that will allow you to pull out only the Adriatic records? the filter worksheet function. Let me type in delta 2. 4 equals filter, open parentheses, that other sheet A:(K). I want to go A:(K). My mouse is not working. Comma. And I want only the Adriatics. Minus, minus parentheses. A:(A) equals A1. I need some closed parentheses. And I need to make my columns wider. That's what the filter worksheet function does. I see I'm not going to be able to finish this, so we'll start this at the beginning of next class. But the big picture, I've got a master sheet with records for various countries, GCE, Adriatic, Netherlands, Baltic, and I want to pull out all the Adriatic sheets. Let me show you how close we are to finish. Please bear with me another 60 or 120 seconds. Move or copy, create a copy. Adriatic 2, let me rename it GCE. And let me change A1 to GCE. And all the GCE records are pulled out. We're done, really. Make a copy of it, change it to the Baltics and the Netherlands, change the name of the sheet, change A1, and that sheet is complete. Okay. You'll have to lose sleep wondering what the details are the next few days. Bad break, sorry about the equipment problems and my lack of familiarity with it. We will pick up this next class and I'll talk a little bit about the exam practice problems. I do want to say that the filter worksheet function I consider particularly important. So you might study that in particular for the exam. Au revoir.
Professor,
Yes.
on the homework, just a quick question about the chemistry lab problem that just if there is a particular service level that you want us to reach.
No, there isn't. 95, something like that, but I'm not going to quibble with that. I just want to see that you can implement in Excel.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
These movie nights that you guys aren't coming to. Summer house.
I don't even know how to end the meeting. I don't know which computer to use. I don't see the big picture. I'm not ever going to try this again with two computers.
Yeah, you can either just use it with the laptop.
I would nothing because I'm not the host.
Correct. I mean, but they were able to see, so
Yeah, and I want to end the recording and start the recording for the next section.
gotcha. Okay, so you can stop the share. I'll allow you to stop the recording.
I usually just go to end over here.
Yeah, and you can do that as well.